Howdy, everyone. I am obviously continuing on getting this engine assembled. Nothing over the top exciting to report at the moment other than just adding more of the accessories onto the accessory case. Let me think of what have I done? I can't remember what I've worked on. So obviously, let's see if I can remember what's what here. This is the adapter pad for a vacuum pump. If you were going to run a vacuum pump, that would be mounted here. I am not, so this gets blocked off. This is the oil filter adapter. Obviously, I do not have the oil filter yet. One PMAG, the other PMAG. These are just loose. I just have, well, they're not loose. I didn't want them flopping around, but they're just thrown kind of rotated off to the side rather than sticking out. I've got them rotated in toward the center line of the engine just to kind of keep them tucked up out of the way. I actually disassembled this fuel pump and cleaned everything, washed out everything really well, inspected the rubber diaphragm and the seals, and cleaned everything up really well. Put it back together. I was on the fence about painting it. I couldn't figure out, I've never seen this type of fuel pump painted. And I don't know if there's a reason behind that or not. It's just aluminum. It's aluminum casting. I was going to paint it. And then I just decided not to. I thought maybe there's a good reason why I've never seen these painted. I didn't want to take the time to research it, so I just cleaned it up really well, reassembled it, and put it back together. And then on this side, this is the adapter interface for the prop governor, which will go on top here, which I'll show you that in a minute. I've got the superior cold air induction manifold in, and I've got my starter in, although this is not completely fastened yet. I've got some hardware to add to it, but that's done. Not too much new that I can think of from last time. All of the fittings that you see, none of these are tight. None of these fittings are tight. Any fitting like these here, or the various pipe plugs. There's one here. Here's another fitting. There's a pipe plug back here. Here's another plug here. A fitting up here. None of that stuff is tight. All of that is just temporary because, like I said, I'm probably going to replace these with black aluminum. I'm not there yet. Same thing with some of the fittings. I may end up replacing some of these fittings either with a different material or a different shape. You know, I don't know that a 45 is needed in this location. Maybe a straight would be better. I don't know. So I haven't tightened any of these. Anything that I know that's going to stay, obviously this plug here is going to stay, so it's safety wired. I think this is a temperature sensor. Of course, that stays. That's safety wired. Things like that are permanent, are in to stay. Here's another plug here. Actually, I think this is, I don't know what this is, but so that's just kind of where I'm at currently with the accessories on the accessory case. Like I said, the next thing is the prop governor, and I've got that here for those that are curious. This is the PCU 5000X prop governor that I've disassembled. Like I said, for those curious, these are the various pieces, parts that make up the prop governor. It's a simple unit, you know, there's no voodoo black magic going on inside any of these components. They're just obviously mechanical machines, if you will. So there's no real big surprises with any of these things. So again, it's a brand new unit, right? But I wanted to take it apart and clean it and inspect it and things of that nature. And I'm really glad, in hindsight, I'm glad that I've decided to do that with this entire engine, because the engine itself and all these different accessories like this, the fuel pump, I even disassembled both PMAGs. Those were really fine. The PMAGs were basically absolutely fine. But anything that has especially oil. The fuel pump wasn't too bad because it only has fuel run through it, but anything that has oil run through it, and like I said, including the block and the accessory case and all that, like I said, this engine's been sitting since 2012, and it was just all the oil that was in it and these types of components is just really super thick, dried out, globby. And, things were sticking, some of these little pieces, parts, here's like a shuttle valve assembly, things like this. There's like a roller thrust bearing in here, that was kind of sticky. And, this whole valve moves up and down inside of the body here. This was kind of gummed up and sticky. Same thing with the bearings in the gear. So I'm really glad that I decided to disassemble everything, because now with everything cleaned, it goes back together, of course, pre-lubricated. It will get fresh oil, and it's just so much nicer. So in my mind, for me personally, it's a good thing that I'm doing this. So just some pieces, parts for the prop governor. All of this has been cleaned. That's why it's bagged. That's why the parts are bagged. I do have to do a little bit of work on this bag and this bag. These two here. These I just threw in the bag without cleaning. So these parts are still covered with the old original oil. So these need to be cleaned. This needs to be cleaned. These are ready for assembly. So the first thing I'm going to do today is clean these. Once I get this clean, I'm going to reassemble the prop governor, and then I'm going to put it back, or I'm going to install it on the engine, and then I'm going to come back to doing cylinder work. I've got one cylinder here with the springs reinstalled. I'm going to finish this cylinder and install it. The next cylinder that I do, maybe I'll do some videotaping of that process. Here are some of the tools that I've been using to get the cylinders disassembled and reassembled. So that's kind of where I'm headed. On another side note, every year, or just about every year, going all the way back to when I was building my Pete and Pole air camper, this time of year, the December time frame of year, I always take at least 2 weeks. Usually it's 3 or 3+ weeks off for Christmas. And during that time frame, I focus the vast majority of my time working on airplanes. So today is day 1 for me this year. Today is, I don't even know what today is. It's December something, but today is the first day to start my 3 weeks of what I called my build fest. So today is day 1. I've got the next 3 weeks off, and I'm going to dedicate that time to working on this airplane. So I'm pretty jacked about that. Having said that, I should be able to process videos quite often, and quite a few, maybe even multiple updates a day or every couple of days. Maybe I can update multiple videos because I've got the time. I've got the next 3 weeks to work on stuff, videotape it, and then upload them to my channel. So just a heads up, from this video going forward, you may start to see actually videos that I have in the backlog. I'll process those first and then get to this video. But you may notice by now, if you've noticed that my other videos are starting to show up more frequently, and multiple were showing up in a single day. That's because I've got the time now with this vacation. So let me stop yapping and get to work, and I'll talk to you guys here soon. Howdy, everyone. Well, I finally made it to get back to these cylinders and getting them assembled and prepped for installation onto the engine. It's really no big deal. It's very easy stuff at this point. It's just a matter of installing the valves and springs and then pre-fitting the piston. And the piston is left exposed enough so that you can slide the piston pin completely out. So when you go to fit this assembly to the engine, you slide the pin out, you fit the connecting rod up in, put the pin back, and then you can slide the entire cylinder assembly onto the block and get the nuts started. So you can see here I've got some pieces parts here. These have been bagged. When I did the disassembly, these were bagged individually. So these parts here are for the exhaust valve. These parts here are for the intake valve. These are for the number 3 cylinder. Like I said, everything is bagged together. So this was in one bag with the valve. This was in another bag with the valve. And the bag was clearly labeled that it was for the number 3 cylinder. So all I did was take the individual valves, cleaned them a little bit, and re-lubricated them. And then I went ahead and dropped in, after I cleaned the spring seats down at the bottom. Those are actually right here. These are cleaned spring seats. 2 right side up and 2 upside down. These have been cleaned, and I dipped these in oil, and then those just lay in the pockets. Those just drop down in here. So those are in place. You can see the valves are in place. And now all I need to do is clean, inspect, and lubricate the individual pieces, parts, and then drop them in. So the springs will go in next, the inner and outer springs for each. And then I'll put in my spring compressor, compress the springs, drop in the retainers, and release the springs. And then bring the entire cylinder back over to the bench. Grab the corresponding piston and rings that originally came out of the cylinder. I marked the individual pistons. So when you look at the cylinder, this is the bottom of the cylinder, right, where the intake and exhaust ports come in and out. This is the bottom of the cylinder. This is the top. So this is the top of the engine, which would be in this orientation here. This would be the bottom of the engine. When I pulled the piston out, I made sure to label the individual piston as to which side of the piston was the bottom, which side of the piston was the top. So when I put it back into the cylinder, I can get it oriented correctly. So when I bring it over to the cylinder or to the engine block, and I have to orient it to the connecting rod, I can have the piston is inside the bore correctly. So I maintain that this is the bottom of the piston, this is the top of the piston. So again, just put the valves in, compress them, put in the retainers, and then it's just a matter of grabbing the correct piston for the correct cylinder, orienting it in the cylinder, making sure that the way that it came out is the way that it's going back in as far as which is top and bottom, and then just fit it just enough so you can get this pin out. And of course you want to ensure that everything is clean, everything is lubricated, the piston rings are in correctly, and that's about it. It's pretty simple. Here are my spring compressors. This is one that I borrowed from a shop. This is one that I made. This one actually worked really well for removal because the retainers on the stems stick. So with this one, I was able to put it up underneath, put it on top of the spring, put some force on it, and then with this nice big flat area, I was able to smack it with a hammer to kind of unseat those retainers, and then use this one to actually do the full compression and pull the retainers out. This one that I had done was a little bit of a struggle because I was going back and forth between these trying to figure out which one to use. This one seems to work the best for installation, so I'm going to stick with it. So I've got everything here ready to roll. I just have to re-lubricate, and then I'm going to put these in, and I'll show you how the spring compressor goes in and everything. So up inside here, I've got a wood block. You can see that this is mounted to my drill press. my drill press table. I just dropped the table all the way, well, not all the way, but I dropped it down low enough so that I can get my body on top here to work the lever. So this is sitting pretty low. Inside here I've got 2 pieces of 2x4 screwed together. Those hold the valves, but it's not long enough to keep the base from sitting on the wood. The base is completely resting on the wood, and you can hear and see there's just a little bit of a gap between the bottom of the valve and the block of wood. So what I'm going to do now, which I forgot about until just this moment, I bring out a strap, a small cargo strap, and I strap this to the table to hold it. And that way I have both hands free to do to work the spring compressor and to install the retainers. So let me get that set up, and I'll get these springs in, and I'll come back and kind of show you how all that goes together.